and Young Professional Network today with a special workshop, so more interactive format. Just to make you aware, we're recording this session as the other sessions. I'm Katarina Bock and I'm part of the steering group, and I'll be chairing this workshop today and kind of giving you some overview of what's going to happen. With me today is also Kim and Robert from the UK Student Research Network, and Jose, our guest today, who's going to introduce himself in a bit and giving us a great presentation followed by a workshop. So the format for today, first we'll have a 30-minute presentation, and afterwards you'll have time for questions. Then we've prepared a Miro board that we're going to share with you, and you'll be split into different groups here in teams with a facilitator, which is one of us. So that's so one of us will be with you in the group, and we have different questions. So just to give you a chance to talk and to talk about your experiences and bring that into a discussion on in a smaller scale, in a smaller group. And then we come back to the bigger group to see if there's final questions and how we can bring it together and share the experiences. I hope that sounds good for everyone. If you feel comfortable, turn your cameras on. If not, we have the chat function that is active. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to type them in the chat. I'll keep an eye on it. Yeah, there's nothing more to say. I would like to thank Jose for his time today, and I'll pass it over to you. Is that okay?
Thank you so much, Katarina. Thank you so much, Robert and Kim, for this invitation today. The first thing I would like to do is congratulate ICOM UK and especially student and emerging professional group for the amazing task you are doing, giving voice and giving the chance to the young people and young professionals to, well, be familiar with some disruptive tools and disruptive work methodologies in museums today. The purpose of the workshop, when you invite me, is a kind of provocation to invite museum professionals to try to exit from their methodological comfort zone and try to delve into the unexpected, the newness, the community weaving process that is something very complex. But I try to ignite some spark to start this important journey, because one of the most amazing effects of using these tools that I will share with you during this presentation is that you start to see a kind of fuzzy space in between classical concepts like participants, visitants, engagement, seasonal programs, our staff versus outside museum annual budget, UX research evaluation, visitor audience. All these concepts belongs to a classical before pandemic model in museums. But I think today things are running very fast, and we need especially work methodologies, new work methodologies, new tools, new narratives. That's the purpose of this workshop, to introduce some of the tools that we are using in cultural inquiry with different museums all over the world. And I would like to share my screen, if you don't mind. So can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I would like to start with this image of Edward Budzinski. His name is Shipbreaking, number 4. Did you know that the 80% of the world commercial ocean fleets end up on the beaches of Bangladesh or in neighboring India in this way? And the 80% of the domestic steel industry in Bangladesh is sourced in this way. I think it's so impressive. The shipbreaking is bordered by a massive and well-connected and distributed kind of local army of shipbreakers, some of them children, who carry out careful and dangerous work preparing the material to be ready for the use. The shaping cycle of life doesn't end on Bangladesh beaches. That's only the beginning. The local connection is immediate and natural. It's like a perfect match with where all the pieces fit apparently in a very spontaneous way on a very giant puzzle around the city. And I like use this example of the shipbreaking as a good metaphor to describe today museum's identity or the accurate profile of museum professionals. Pre-pandemic museums has been like these giant and splendid cruises, truly floating cities or freighters overflowing with containers. People were open-mouthed when they dock. You can see them from miles of distance and point with your finger. Here they are. But it's also obvious that someday they will end and their days in between some sand shelf, rusted and forgotten. And then some professionals will take off some main parts of the hull to repair or heal urgent and severe community bounds. Bounds relate with climate justice, with mental health isolation of the community, well-being bounds of the community. Sometimes it will be a common ground, inspirational project. Sometimes will be connecting climate change, for example, impact with children violence or even migration. Sometimes will be a specific ripple action, waving a new network with other dismantled ships, providing perspective or focus resources, an experience, practices deep listening, or even building a common new narrative where community and museums are synonyms and exchangeable yet. Usually very far away from the museum, building walls, perimeter, in a hospital, in a supermarket, in a farm, in a video game competition, a refugee room, or even a war bunker. So I would like to start a little bit with the context because it's a kind of a question of salads. From war salads, I'm sure that you have here so many times nearby in the conference, you are participating all these words that are trend, puzzle words, trendy words, involvement, participatory approach, co-creation, community building, engagement. But the problem is when you overuse the words, finally they don't mean nothing. And I follow here the wonderful Cecilia Wessinger, that is a leader in community weaver plans and projects, speak about communities as salad, but a salad, not melting pot, where all the ingredients are recognizable and necessary to provide the dish its best flavor, its best identity. And it's very different to have like fashion words to use conveniently in different contexts, or have a clear idea and concept about what is museums and community. And I think it's important to define, first of all, what is community. I found this wonderful definition from Adrienne Marie Brown about what is a community as a place to practice and participate in care, attention, knowing, and being known, being protected, having room to make mistakes, and still belong, not just allowed to be there, but be valuable, to heal, to recover. Communities feel responsible for each other. So I want to highlight in this definition the word care, because for me, the big transformation in museums is exactly in this word, care. And if the community and a pivotal characteristic of a community is the caring practices each other. If we don't have this pivotal element, it's not a community. Could be a group, could be an association, could be a lobby, could be what organization, could be a museum, but not a community. And also it's interesting to keep in mind this component of feel that they belong together. This is a definition for Fabian for Miller, and I think it's also a very important characteristic of a community, to feel each one of the members feel that they belong together and they can explain themselves together through this community. So this is completely connected with the concept of caring museum. A caring museum is a museum that puts the needs and challenges of the community at the heart of its identity, sense of purpose and belonging. So community should be an identity builder for the museum, should guide the museum process, should validate the museum action. And community care-oriented museum is something related with this definition of Nuala Morse that I recommend in this article. Care ethics foreground the public character of care to guide our thinking by which the museum might be best used to care for, maintain, and repair our neighborhoods, our environments, and our worlds. So this aspect of caring ourselves, caring our neighborhoods, caring our environments, and caring our worlds is the key definition of care museum connected with this concept of community. And I recommend this self-checking list that we have here, like a kind of 6-7 questions that we use when we start a conversation with a museum that is aware about how can we be much more community aligned, much more community centered organization. You have here simple questions that you can use to start the process. For example, are you able to mention a personal story of some of your visitors that has touched you in some way? Can you think about some specific challenge of your community where your museum is located? Is something that is challenging for your museum? Or what do you think about the people who never visit your museum? Is something like you never think about? Can you use a word to describe your museum in 10 years, seeing the museum in 10 years? How can you represent the identity of your museum, trying to explain this to a children of 9 years old? What is a museum for you? And all these checklists can be a good starting point to define your position. Because community centers museum or caring museums are important not per se, are important because it's the only way to be ecologically, socially, even economically sustainable in the mid-long term. Is also fundamental to get resources from vital resources from the community. There is a big transformation in the fundraising model where communities are literally saving museums all over the world with their resources. It's also the way to be authentic and unique. The pre-COVID model is a blockbuster model. You can see a lot of similar culture offers all around the world, but people is waiting, is trying to seek and find unique, authentic programs, persons, contents and the Caring Museum is the way to achieve this. Also to afford and face disruptive changes, because community is at the avant-garde of these disruptive challenges and can provide you with precious tips to be able to face these disruptive changes. is the best storytelling builder is the community. So stay tuned with this storytelling power is fundamental. It's also fundamental to spread the effects of your actions in the museum, the scalability, and finally, to order your priorities depending the needs. Is a compass. The community needs are the best way to order and prioritize your action during your path. But the question is that when professionals start to think about how can we start this process, they have a lot of questions, and it's completely normal. How can we be part of the community? How can we be seen by as one of them? How can museum professionals can be part of their narrative and be considered as trustful partners, even when we have previous stories of difference or even fights or conflicts between museums and communities? How can we transform our community connection in a museum program? This is not easy at all. How can we measure the impact? And now in the mirror session that we will have after my presentation, we will have these three main break rooms, focus on these three main times in the process when you start the movement, the conversation with the community, the second moment when you stay in the community and start to work from the community, and finally, how can you measure, how can you evaluate the impact in the community if you are working from this caring museum perspective? So a lot of questions, and it's not easy. And we understand perfectly that this sometimes overcomes the capacity of some professionals that are trying to work in a different way. And that's what we are trying to support them and provide them with different work methodologies. So I will introduce briefly some of these tools that chronologically order. The first one is when you start the conversation with the community, and we use this community museum matrix that is so simple but can be a good starting point to take a picture about your museum position towards your community. And it's a simple table with 5 columns. You can score with some scoring and punctuation, 6 different criteria that provide you some feedback to start to think, how can we move towards the community? And our recommendation is that to be very honest, to do this with your team, with as much people in the staff, museum staff as possible, and repeat and track applying this table every 3 months, 4 months to see the progress. And you can see here like 6 different criteria. If the community and museum long-term challenges or needs are the same, if any person who visits the museum can create or start something easily, if the people come back to the museum and stay as long as possible because they have this kind of home feeling, or is just only visit one specific exhibition or be involved in some specific version, and that's all. If the main museum evaluation criteria is the impact on people's well-being life, or is only get audience or improve the number of visitants. And the question of the funding, that is very important. If the community funding us in some way, is sharing the resources in some way, are we able to build hybrid, flexible teams inside, outside the museum? So this is a kind of a starting point to ignite some ideas and continue the conversation with your colleagues during the time. When you start a conversation with a community, you need to consider this like a long journey. And you need to be very honest. You need to consider the background. Sometimes the community has not a good experience with the museum. Sometimes has a good experience, but you need to know this background, this previous storytelling. You need to build trust relationships and sometimes even disappear as the museum guy or the museum girl they see on you. And try to be involved in their projects, not in your projects. As museum professionals, we try even immediately to sell our wonderful projects to the community and tell, this is amazing, this is a unique chance, you need to be part of this. And the community members can say this and tell, okay, it's not interesting for us, or even reject your invitation. This is perfectly normal and sometimes happen. You need to be very empathic. You need practice deep listening, and you need to know what are the main stories framing the community. So I recommend, for example, to practice something that is very easy and simple, but is very powerful. Leave your office every day and spend 20 minutes in an exhibition room or in a workshop room, just only observing your visitors and trying to start a conversation with them. It's what we call the living room. Imagine that you are in your home, in your living room of your home, and you see some stranger come in. The first reaction is, how are you? Who are you? Why are you here? Imagine that you are able to ask them, why are you here visiting the museum? Why is it interesting for you? What's your personal story? Why this afternoon or in the morning you are spending time here finding what? What is relevant for you? It's important for you that I stay here deep listening to you. How can I help you? And I think this is a good starting point to weave communities and to build trust relationships with your audience in a very easy way. You don't need any budget. And then share your discoveries and the feedback of this visitant with your colleagues when you take a coffee with them. Back into the museum, you have here a kind of important tool to translate when you have built these trust relationships with the community. You need like a kind of big roadmap and have like a kind of frame to get all the information that you will receive from the community and try to organize, order in different groups of information, like futures of the community, dynamics of the community, and resources that can provide the community. And this is something fundamental that you can use afterwards to translate in terms of museum issues. For example, if you have some structure of the community or some stories of the community or the leaders, you can, or the language or the storytelling, you can translate all these in some core values of your museum, in some mission and vision identities, in sense of purpose of your museum, and try to get closer and closer and align with the futures of the community. The same for the dynamics, the challenges, the needs, the urgencies, the priorities of the community should be translated in some way in your activities, your exhibitions, your events, your projects. For the resources, communities are incredibly rich in all kinds of resources, not only money, not only finance, also contacts, know-how, skills, capacity building, networking, and this is an asset, a fundamental asset to transform this in your resources, in your assets as a museum. You have here also a description when you are working with the community, from the community, a path to create contents. And you can invite them to the museum to waive the relations. You can start a discussion and provide them a safe space, confident space, and very deep listen space to start a creation, a co-creation. Using prototyping techniques, simple prototyping techniques, they can start to translate and land this conversation into something more specific. And then you can involve in this organic design thinking process your curatorial team or your mediation team to land all these real things into something that start to seem like a program or like an exhibition or like a workshop or whatever. Then you can enact the issue, you can enact the initiative, and finally get the legacy of this initiative and choose. Imagine that they create a climate change exhibition or initiative in the city. And then you can use it focusing on children or Gen Z generation, and you push this initiative like a kind of tree much more in deep. And finally, one tool that I think is very important is at the end, when you work with the community during months or even 1 year or 1 year and a half or 2 years. How can you measure the impact of this initiative in the community, in the museum? And I think this is very challenging because when you are working from this approach, the classic museum community boundaries disappear. The concept of engagement, the classical concept of seasonal program or visitor statistics no longer make sense. It's a continuum. It's a kind of synchrony that you establish between the museum and the community in a whole organic team, hybrid team. And I recommend combining the impact, this community museum matrix that we saw at the beginning, with this every which way impact that I will introduce fastly now. Because for the caring museums, what is important to evaluate and measure is the well-being that you are able to achieve in 3 levels: in the community, in your own museum personnel, and yourself on your own. The well-being can be defined in a very different ways, but it's something very holistic and is very straight related with questions like health, mental health, like empathy, like resilience, like even feelings and emotions. And you have described, I authorize the organizers of this event to share this presentation with you if you're interested in. You can take a look more in detail after this presentation about what kind of items can I measure or evaluate when I'm considering the community well-being, or how can I measure? And you have here the description of some tools that you can use to measure the community well-being. How can we use, or how can identify the main outputs? And the same for the museum personal well-being and your own well-being. But this every way impact, the advantage of this model is that it's very holistic and is very comprehensive and involve different dimensions, not only economic dimensions, but also social dimensions related with, for example, diversity, inclusion, and integration. Finally, you have here as a kind of portfolio or description of some examples of museums and institutions that using these kind of tools and other ones focus on care, they are creating amazing impact in communities. You have this example of the Bloomberg Philanthropist Public Art Challenge in Los Angeles, focused on water scarcity for the community. You have the Metropolitan Art Museum, You Met Art Box with elder ones and social catering using their resources to fight and neutralize the isolation of elderly in the community. Or this example in Groninger Museum, training doctors in stress to reduce them through engagement with art, or the amazing La Rodadora in Ciudad Juárez, Mexico, to reduce the levels of violence in the streets, inviting the children to this amazing program to reduce their nightmares and the conflicts they have in the families. So I'm finishing inviting you to be familiar with these tools, to use these tools to apply step by step to any of the challenges that you identify with the community and start the path. And of course, share your experience with us because it's the most important. So now the room is yours.
Thank you so much, Jose, for the presentation, especially for the tools. I would like to ask if anyone has a question already before we start. I've seen a question in the chat. Yes, we can share the presentation. I did create Jose kindly sent us the presentation beforehand and we deposited it in a drive, so I can share the link with you in the end. Are there any questions for Jose? At the moment, we still have time for more questions if they might come up at a later point. I see
Yvonne.
You have a question, Yvonne? Then you're still on mute. You can unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question.
So very nice. I'm Yvonne. Very nice meeting you all, and specifically Jose, who I know from former times. I want to ask in general, how does this concept relate to the collection of a museum when you think about caring? I saw the Metropolitan Museum of Art and also the Groningen Museum, which are foremostly art museums. But is it very relevant what kind of collection a museum has?
Yes, absolutely. I think this is a very important question because the problem is that you have an historical collection. You have a closed collection. The collection is what it is. And sometimes museums ask us, how can we do relevant this collection in terms of this approach, caring museum, and how can we do not only accessible, meaningful, because the collection is a kind of a group of objects that has been chosen by some other people, professional curators. So the first and the key point is start a conversation about the collection with the community and start and open the collection. I mean, the collection is the collection of the museum, but not the collection of the community. And we need to be able to design, to build the channels, and some of the tools that I show can be useful for this, to start a dialogue, a conversation, to invite the community to first connect with the collection and know the collection and choose what are the objects that are interesting for them, but also even complete the collection, contribute to the collection with their own objects, with their own. And I think this is very powerful because it's a way to create a hybrid collection. And this is a very good entry point to reshape the relation between museum staff and the community.
I see. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Very interesting question. I see already that's like a it's something that not only one department of a museum can be involved in. Are there any other questions at the moment?
I would like to add just very briefly for this question of Yvonne, that also the curatorial team should be able to update in terms of what is actual, what is happening nowadays, the collection of the museum, as a way to connect with the needs and challenges of the community. I mean, imagine that you have a collection in your museum and some of the objects of the museum is related with health. With the pandemic is a fantastic chance to connect this collection with the challenges of the community in terms of health or mental health or whatever. So update in terms of what is nowadays important for the community is something that could be very powerful to connect with the community.
To give a different spin. Yeah.
Yvonne.
You have another question?
I have one other question related to what you just said, Jose. When the community is adding objects to the collection, should they be preserved in the museum itself, or should they be taken away at the moment when the exhibition or the exchange has been finished?
This is a very good question. And my answer is, should we have the same standard that the other objects of the collection? To have a whole, I mean, because if not, you again have a division. But if you want to create very powerful and deep bonds with the community, they need to feel that their objects are the museum objects at the same level. And they receive the same care, the same preservation, and the same, and is exactly equally interesting for the curatorial department, for example.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We have a question in the chat as well from Wang that says, thank you very much for your presentation. You mentioned museum is part of the community. This reminds me of the Eco Museum. I have a question about the differences between museum as part of the community and community as part of the museum. Could you please explain a bit more? So what is the distinction between framing it one way or the other?
This is a fantastic question. Thank you very much. I mean, if we are usually being very practical, the path is try to align the museum towards the community needs. It's very disruptive and it's very difficult to achieve in one single movement, even in 1 year, that the community absorb the museum. So the museum need to approach the community, and that means a lot of time, invest a lot of time, invest a lot of resources, a lot of strategy, a lot of involvement from the staff of the museum. But the skyline, the final achievement of this process is that the community consider the museum as a part of it, as a part of the community, as a partner, as a natural partnership, as a natural colleague, as a natural player. So the ideal is when the community run a project and think immediately, okay, this part is perfect for the museum guys, or this part can be perfectly done by the museums. But it's a project led by the community. So one thing is the museums are working close to the community and involving the community in some ways. This is one level. This is one of the levels that we are working a lot with different museums. But another level is communities that inside of their network has museums or schools, and they are able to work all together to support the community projects, the community projects, or even the communities support the museum, paying or giving them, the museum, financial resources.
Thank you so much for that for that question. I think it's important to look at it from both sides and how incorporated community and museums are and how intertwined that whole subject is. If there are no more questions at the moment, I would say we'll hop onto a more workshop format and smaller groups and give you the chance to share your experiences about community work. Jose, could you stop sharing your screen for a second?
Yes.
Because then I can show you the Miro board that we've prepared. Wait, maybe if it works if I share this. Do you now see my Miro board? That is the question.
Yes.
Yes, fantastic. Yes. So as you can see, we'll share the link with you in a second. If you've never worked with Miro, it's an online whiteboard which you can take stickers like Post-it notes, drag them around, and enter your thoughts into it. This is a free version, so you should all be able to access it. We've divided it into 3 groups according to Jose's presentations and the 3 focus points he laid out. So how to get started with community-based work, community-based projects. The second one, how are you staying in touch with your community? And then the third one would be, how can you evaluate community projects? So these are the 3 groups. We're going to put you into 3 different groups. And depending who's in the room with you, that's the kind of topic you can focus on. In case you have difficulties getting the conversation started, I put in the self-caring checklist from Jose, which might be a good starting point to think about how in what relation you worked with the community or would like to. Then what experiences you've made in your community work will play into it. But also, if you think about tools and about the tools that Jose presented, you could share what tools you might have tried already or which one of the tools that Jose briefly presented is something you would like to try and why. So that is kind of the outline for the workshop. And we have, I'd say 20 minutes for it in the different rooms. And afterwards, we'll come back and see what everyone has accomplished. So it's more for you to get more hands-on and practical with it. I hope that's working out. I'll share the whiteboard link with you in a second. My apologies that the language around the Miro board is German because I'm originally German, so it's all in that setting. So I hope you get you can work around it, but it should be very, I find it very intuitive, so I hope it works out for you.
Yes.
Here's the link. And Robert will put us into different groups.
Yeah, and I mean, since the Teams breakout rooms only allow me to manually assign people to each different room, so if you have a specific room that you want to join or a specific theme you want to talk about, please type the room number 1, 2, or 3 in the chat box so I can assign you to that specific room. Otherwise, I will just try my best to randomly assign you to rooms. So the themes for that is okay, let me just open. Yeah, what Katrina just said. So if you have a preference, please could you type the room number? And I will start the breakout rooms.
Okay. We have some preferences. And I already see some people have found the Miro board, so that's working. Fantastic.
Okay. So now I will start the breakout rooms and hopefully see some of you there.
Hello? Hello?
Hello? Yeah.
I don't seem to be on a specific group. Or
Yeah, I'm just sorry, I'm still trying to assign everyone. It's a bit of a tricky thing.
Okay.
I think we're back to the main room.
Yes, I think we have to. We're back in the main room, and I'll click here. Hop, hop. Okay, let's see till everyone's kind of back.
Okay, sorry.
Hello, everyone. We're trying to get everyone kind of back in the room. Okay, we'll see if I can't see Robert yet, but he must be he must be here somewhere. I'm going to share my screen here with the Miro board so we can have a look together. Up. And let's see where Robert is once he's back. We can kick this off. I hope you found this this kind of workshop style, half like 20 minutes, good to exchange your ideas and experiences. So the group I was in, we had a very good discussion with Molly about how to keep the community involved, which was really good. I can't see Robert at the moment. But wait, there is some.
We're back.
You're back. Robert's
back
as well. Hey.
Hello. How
this
was it?
It was good. It was good. And so just for everyone here, we tried out the breakout rooms for the first time and everything worked. So that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Robert, I know you were in the first group. I'm going to share the Miro board and just take like maybe 3 minutes or so to give us all an update what you discussed in the group, and I'll focus on your first part.
Yeah, no problem. I can see Hope in the audience. Hi, Hope. It's good to see you. Okay, so yeah, okay, I can see the screen now. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, we discussed. Our topic was how to start a community-based project, museum. And I mean, we had Marta, Christiana, who had some very interesting points. And some, I mean, important ones we've put on the notes. One is, so as a starting point, we should start by knowing the community. So like, firstly, to identify what this community means. So first, to identify what this museum is, like, is it a traditional sense of community, like where we live, or is it like a group of people, like student community? Yeah. And then, you know, the next step would be to get to know what's going on in this community, like to know the news, events, difficulties, what they have, what they're enduring in this community, like from local resources, for example, like, you know, on the street talking, or the pub, or maybe doing some general interviews of the people in this community to know just, you know, what they're dealing with at the moment, so we can better start from there, you know, to build our project. Yeah, I mean, and then some other things, for example, like well-being of the community. So just like Jose said in his presentation, a community museum should be a caring museum. So you know, we should care for the community physically and mentally. So the well-being of the community is very important for this project. And so how can we do that? You know, and Martha threw out a very interesting point is through food. So, you know, we should improve the, you know, maybe the cafe or the cooking of the museum, and maybe like from different cultures. So when people actually come to the museum, they can, you know, be curious, or get to know different culture and different groups of people from all over the world. Yeah, so these are some starting points, I think, for us. Yeah.
Sounds like an interesting discussion in your group.
Yeah.
I'd like to take the point with food to move over to what our group discussed.
Yeah.
And
I see you typed cafe, you know.
Cafe. Yeah, Molly gave us an example. She's from Brighton, and she said the museum in Brighton, her hometown, they closed down the cafe, and then they realized that fewer people came until they reopened it. So it was such an incentive for people to go in. And we started discussing this to say, if you work with the community, how you can bring them in. And maybe for people who are not used to going to museums, if you want to reach groups you haven't interacted with before, maybe not, getting them into more for social setting, like a cafe or another social space might be a good incentive. And then they're like, oh, I'm here already, so maybe I'll just go to the exhibition now that I'm here, and explore that for themselves. So never underestimate the power the cafe can have. We also discussed, like, one of the main points was the legacy. So let's say you have a program that's running, or you're working with an institution as an intern or for a limited amount of time, and you set something up, you work with the community, but then the project ends. So what is going to happen with it? So we raised this, how to pass these relationships that you build, how to pass them on. And I liked that Molly contributed that in retrospective, if she did a community project again and was in a non-permanent position, she would try to build relationships to staff across an institution that are there long term, because they're there long term, so it's more that they can do with it. So it's not just something that like appears or like is there for a short amount of time, but it has a certain sustainability. So that was a main thing that we discussed in our group, and something I can definitely agree on. So it is that, but we also said that the role of ownership. So if people develop a sense of ownership for the museum and a certain pride connected to what they've contributed, that they can maybe show to others, they might become multiplicators for a certain event. Because they might bring in friends or relatives to say, oh, look, this is what I've worked on with the museum, this is what I contributed. So it might change dynamic of who comes to visit. So yeah, that's just as the summary of what we discussed. And now, Jose, could you quickly sum up what your group discussed in terms
Absolutely.
of evaluation? And I'll scroll down to this.
Thank you. Yeah, the question of evaluation started as a discussion in my group about how many museums are doing today what we call community washing. Is use the community, but only for their interest or their specific benefit in terms of communication, marketing, or whatever, and has zero impact or no impact at all in the community. And again, we highlight the need to consider the impact in this holistic way in the community, in your own personal of the museum, and yourself. So this is something difficult because there is a lot of sometimes interest in museums run by sometimes administration or government with a clear list of indicators to achieve, and it's not easy to do the transition between this very close format, this very rigid model format, and this other new one that put the community impact on the center of the strategy. So there is a gap between the reality sometimes and the desire of the teams of the museums that try to follow more holistic, more even real model to evaluate the impact. And we have discussed also based on this this tool of every way model, the possibility to consider the well-being in the staff in their group as something very important in terms of how much time spend the staff in real community projects, not in projects that are related with the community. Projects that are important for the community, how much time they spend, are they interested in, and what kind of positive feedback, not only in terms of money, also in terms of be considered as somebody important or truly needed or meaningful for the community. And well, reviewing some of these criteria that I propose in this model, we debated a little bit the possibility to step by step introduce some of these criteria in the portfolio, in the position of the human resources pool, to consider that a project deserves to be done, not only because we have the money, not only because we have the budget, not only because some director or some position in the structure tell us you need to do this, because it's important for the community and all the staff can agree about this and provide a lot of joy at the end to do this kind of projects, because at the end this impact positively in the sense of belonging of the staff. They are literally reconnected in a very deep sense with the community, and they start every day in their workplaces considering that this project has sense, this project is something useful, meaningful for somebody that can be benefited in the community. That's more or less the summary of my group.
Thank you so much. Is there any, we have time if anyone has an extra question for Jose or for anything in the discussions or comments, this is your chance now before we wrap up. I'll give it a second. Otherwise, I would like to make you aware of 2 events that are happening from ICOM in April. The first one is there's a conference in Glasgow. Robert, could you say a couple of words to that? And I'll share the link in the chat. Okay, so the next event for the ICOM UK main committee is going to be the annual Working Internationally conference, and this year we're finally back to in-person conference, and it's going to be in Glasgow, where the ICOM UK was trying to put every year in a different location. So last year it was online, but it was hosted in a Welsh museum, in the Welsh National Museum, and this year it's going to be in Glasgow. And yeah, in this link you can find the news, official news on the ICOM UK website, and how to sign up for the tickets and registration. Yeah, so please, if you have the time or if you're interested in the topic, please do check out the Working Internationally conference. Yeah. Yes. The topic is how to address legacies of colonialism. Which definitely has a couple of like interesting talks ahead. I had a look. And the second one is in terms of the Student and Emerging Professional Network, we do have a next museum talk lined up for the 26th of April. Stay tuned for more information and a sign-up sheet, and it's going to be about what role the French Revolution played in the development of the modern museum. So we'll take a more historical turn, but I believe it's going to be a very interesting discussion. We have a question from Hope. Is it Hope? Yes, fire away, Hope.
Thank you. May I have one more question for Jose? I want to ask about a fundamental question about what is the definition of the community. I would want to ask because when we talk about community, we will actually talk about local community or indigenous community because since they share the same identity. But nowadays, more and more museums will focus on to engage migration community or refugee community, and they are community actually with different cultural identity and from different the world. So, in your opinion, how to participate, how to engage this kind of community that full of heterogeneity? I mean, they are so different and they may not share the same identity. And since migration or refugee actually is an identity that the nation forced to give them. So in your opinion, how to participate in this refugee and migration community?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think is fundamental this dimension of caring to define a community, and you can find this caring dimension in migrants, especially in migrants, because they are extra aware about this caring dimension. They care each other, they care others different from them, and this is a perfect example of community. A group of migrants, a group of people that are trying to connect and build trust relationships, and their sense of belonging is the group itself, the community itself, and this is something very interesting. I mean, they are not, maybe they think that they belong to their hometowns or whatever, but they are outside or they are in a different country. Their people, the other migrants are their community, and they feel that they belong to this community in a very clear way, in a very deep way. So I would like to highlight these two dimensions of the community. When you ask, is this a community or not? A community is not a group of interest. You have this in the presentation, you have this quote of Henry Mintzberg: networks connect, communities care. And I think this is fundamental. If you can feel and you can find this caring each other, and that they see as you really are, and they take care of you and you take care of them, you are a community. You are in front of a community. No matter the ages, no matter the culture backgrounds, no matter the whatever, you are in a community. And sometimes you have communities that stay during so many years. You have communities that stay only 6 months, but it's a community, and you can work with them. And sometimes you have a distributed community that is start digitally and continue physically. So there's a lot of variance and a lot of possibilities, but the common ground that I find again and again to define I'm just in front of a community is this caring feeling, this caring dimension. And if you ask any of the members do you belong to this community? They can answer clearly and straight, yes, I'm feel as a part of this community, and I want to support, and I spend time, and I'm involved in this project, and I want to push the community forward, and it's very easy to see if you are in front of a community or only in front of a group.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And with this, I would like to thank all of you for coming along today for our workshop and for sharing your thoughts, especially here in the big round, but also in the smaller groups in the breakout sessions, and for trying out this new format with us. Robert just shared a link in the chat in case you're interested in being a speaker in our museum talk series. Do take the time and fill it in, and we might contact you as a future speaker. And a big thank you to Jose for coming along today and telling us about community involvement and also answering all of our questions so patiently. Thank you so much. It is much appreciated.
So honored to be with you. Thank you.
I'm glad. Fantastic. And with this, I would say goodbye. Have a lovely afternoon, and maybe see you at some event in the future. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Marta. Bye. Bye, Yvonne.
Bye, Catherine.
Tot ziens. Tot ziens.
Bye, guys.
Oh yeah, or do you want to talk about how it went for a second?
Sure.
Maybe we can stop the recording.
Oh yeah. Maybe just stop the recording now.